Chapter 7. John Meets Ben. The Gazette building stood in the same shopping parade as the estate agent offices where John had met Susan the previous day. It was about 100 metres closer to the town centre and set back from the road to accommodate an overcrowded car park in front of the building. John parked in the street, hoisted his huge camera bag onto his shoulder and went in. Minutes later he found himself in the busy newsroom where the editor introduced him to the sub-editor, news editor, chief reporter and the 8 other reporters. There were no photographers. "One's on holiday, the other is having his appendix out. That's why you're here," explained the editor. John looked into the faces of everyone as he was introduced. They varied a great deal in their ages and physique, but all seemed very friendly. Dick East, the news editor, showed him to the photographer's corner, made sure he was familiar with the computer setup and bought him a coffee. "OK, here's the diary with your jobs for today and Saturday. There's a lot of stuff, as you can see. I've marked the priority jobs with a P in red. The others, well, do them if you can. If you can't get to them, don't worry. It's much more important that you get good pictures from the main ones. There are usually too many things to photograph and not enough time, like every other newspaper in the country. But you can see I've left some gaps so you have time to load your pictures into our system. And eat well. Today's first job is not until 10 o'clock, so take your time. Saturday's not too busy during the day, but the main event is in the evening. It's the start of the Hemel Spectacular, which is a whole fortnight of events. It's being held in a big marquee in the Boxmoor end of town, between the church, the cricket ground and the canal. "I saw them putting it up," said John. "It's huge, bigger than a circus tent." "You'll need these, a ticket to get in, and this backstage pass. Here are the numbers to press to open our main office door in case you want to get in here after normal hours. We're hoping to use at least 10 photographs in the centre pages and 1 on the front. It will be dead easy to get pictures because it will all happen just in front of you. Do what you want, but there are 2 very important shots. The first one will be of the mayor unveiling the display case with the skeleton of the mystery woman in it. Oh yes, I've heard of that, the dead highwaywoman, or Mrs. Snook, or whoever she is. Make sure Dr. Salter, the archaeologist, is in the picture. Also Ben Carter, if you can get him in. He's the man who dug up the skeleton, but he's a very retiring sort of chap, and we haven't been able to get a shot of him yet. The other must-have picture is the great Zoldini. Have you heard of him?" John shook his head. "Neither have I. Apparently he's a world-famous magician. I can't stand magic shows myself, and he does spectacular illusions. His stunt will be the grand climax to the evening. OK, got all that? Oh, just one more thing. After the unveiling, don't bother to get any more pictures of the mayor, Diana Malacott. She's in the paper often enough." One of the reporters interrupted. "She is also a real cow and pig-ignorant. We call her Mayor Malaprop, because she can't even make one of her crap speeches without getting the words wrong. Only yesterday she opened a school garden and started talking about orgasmic vegetables." The editor chipped in. "Sometimes I'm tempted to publish what she says word for word, but even I'm not that cruel." Half an hour later, John found himself on his first assignment, to illustrate the lack of water in the River Gade. He was to meet a concerned resident in the park by the old iron bridge over the river. He had been told it was in easy walking distance, so he left his bag in the car and travelled light, carrying just one camera fitted with his favourite all-purpose wide-angle lens. As he came near the bridge, he could see a solitary figure leaning on the white-painted railings and gazing into the water. She was a middle-aged woman in an anorak and green Wellingtons. She didn't seem to be aware of his approach and kept staring downwards. John was just about to cough when she began speaking without looking up. "You must be the Gazette man. I've been waiting half an hour." "I'm sorry, they told me 10 o'clock. "I'm sure they did," she said in a voice like a headmistress. "Don't apologise. Those reporters get everything wrong. I'm Molly Waring," she said, turning to look at him at last. "Come and see what I'm on about." "You're saying there's not enough water in the river." "Well, look at it." There are lots of weeds." "That is part of the problem. But this time last year the water was right up to the banks on either side, and this is after all that winter rainfall we've had. The level has gone down about 1 metre in the last month. Something strange is happening because we can now walk right across the river bed. Would you mind standing in the middle of the river for me? No, don't get me in a photograph. I hate having my picture taken. Oh, it's all right. It'll be mostly river. I just need a distant figure to illustrate the size of the problem. She still looked reluctant, but followed John down to the river edge. He showed her the camera. I can let you see the pictures on the screen when we've finished, and you can tell me what you think. He held her hand as she cautiously stepped into the clear water and found firm footing on the pebbles. If you're okay there, I'm going back onto the bridge. By the time he got there, she was in the middle of the river with the water lapping at the top of her boots. There you are, she said. You couldn't have done this last year, not since a drought of 1976, but I don't suppose you remember that. I wasn't even born then, but my parents told me about it. Right, if you're ready, just look at me. That's it. Only don't smile. It's a serious subject, I think. Yes, it is, and I hate this. I'm no good in front of a camera. You're doing very well. I've nearly finished. Just one more picture. Can you put your arms out to the side like this? Why? It tells the reader that the story is less about you, but more about what's around you. Like this? Yes, but don't smile. Just talk to me. It will relax you. What shall I say? Just count to 10. 5, 6, 7. OK, finished. I'll come and help you out. On the way down, he fired off a couple of shots of her wading through the water, which he later decided were far the best pictures. He thanked her for being so helpful and was very happy when she looked at the camera screen and approved the images. Walking back to the car, he noticed a transparent plastic bag stuck to the windscreen containing a piece of paper on which he could see printed in red letters, "Documents enclosed." Oh, shit, he thought. It must be over an hour, I suppose. He ripped it off the windscreen and tore it open. In bold red lettering it said, "Hemel, Hempstead Parking Control. It is an offence to leave a vehicle in this parking bay for more than 1 hour. The driver of this vehicle is now liable to a fine of £60 payable within 14 days. And then on the second sheet of paper, "Not really. Welcome to the Gazette." John heard a loud cheering and whistling. He looked up and saw a gaggle of reporters waving at him from the upstairs windows of the Gazette building. His mobile phone went off. "Oh, very funny," he said, looking up and grinning at Dick East with a phone to his ear. "You've passed the initiation ceremony," chortled Dick. "I'm sure you're greatly relieved at some more good news. Your next job is cancelled. You coming back up?" "No," said John, pretending to be really offensive. "I shall resign immediately and never speak to any of you again. Seriously, I'm going to take a trip up the river. The lady on the bridge says there is plenty of water upstream. It's worth a look, I think. Is that okay?" "Sure, but don't get carried away. You've got all those other jobs this afternoon." "I'll be fine as long as I don't get any more parking tickets." Taking the main road north out of town along the Gade Valley, it took him about 15 minutes to find the meadow where the river started as a mere trickle of water. He drove back the way he came, glancing now and then at the stream as it more or less followed the same direction as the road. He stopped on a bridge less than a mile from the town, where the river seemed very healthy indeed, with a great volume of water flowing between its banks. He parked his car and walked beside the river for a while until it disappeared into a thick wood which was overgrown with elder trees and brambles. It was impossible to go any further, so he returned to the car and drove about a quarter of a mile closer to town, where he found a gap in the trees, which revealed a rough track, hardly more than a path. He drove his car onto the grass verge and walked down the track. He had put on his green camouflage jacket and carried a pair of binoculars as well as a camera, so he would look like a bird watcher. The wood was so thick John felt as if he was walking through a tunnel and had to bend down in quite a few places to avoid the branches. He soon came to a junction with a larger tunnel through which the river flowed. The path turned sharply to the right and continued along the river bank with just enough room for one person to walk. Alcoves had been cut into the undergrowth, which he presumed were passing places should anyone meet an oncoming pedestrian. John observed that the canopy of twigs and small branches had been carefully cut back over the path, but over the water the trees were untouched. Many years of growth had turned the old and twisted branches into fantastic shapes, many of them festooned with moss and creepers. He was pleasantly surprised to see the bright blue flash of a kingfisher as it skimmed along the water before disappearing into the trees. Then quite suddenly, after a sharp bend, the river opened up into a lagoon of almost still water about the size of a tennis court. As he became quite overwhelmed by the magical beauty of the trees reflected in the water, a sudden noise broke the silence. He remained rooted to the spot as the sound of rushing water, quietly at first and then louder and louder, jolted him out of his trance. He glanced upstream to see if it was coming from there, but immediately realised that it was in the other direction at the far end of the lagoon. Minutes later he found himself climbing round the edge of a dam consisting of a wall of interlocking steel shutters, similar to those he had seen on large construction sites. It soon became obvious to him that the sudden noise occurred because the water had just begun to flow over the low point of the centre of the dam. He could also see that it fell vertically 5 metres down to a water wheel which was turning merrily. "Can I help you?" The question came from a 60-year-old man standing at the foot of the dam with a large adjustable spanner in his hand. John could feel himself going red in the face as he apologised. "I'm really sorry, intruding on your private space. I know I shouldn't be here. I'll go straight away." "Would you mind telling me why you've come?" "I'm a photographer with the Gazette. We are doing a story about the lack of water in the River Gade." "Ah. I'd better go. Once again, I do apologise." "No, wait. I want to talk to you." There was a large clunk as he threw the spanner on top of some others in a large tool bag. "You'd better come down. There are some steps behind you. See them?" He turned his back on John and ambled over to the veranda of the nearby house and slumped down in the rocking chair. John followed him across the grassy clearing towards the strange house. On the way he found it impossible to stop himself staring at the weird pieces of machinery lying around. "Do you want a beer?" The older man lifted a can from a cool box by his feet and waved it in the air. "No thanks, I won't even have one drink if I'm driving." "Where's your car?" "It's beside the road where I came in at the end of your path." There was an uncomfortable pause. John tried to look as relaxed as possible, leaning against the rail of the veranda and looking up at the dam. He was uncertain of how to behave and felt it would be prudent to leave his new companion in his own personal space. "I'm John Street, by the way." "I know who you are. Do you know who I am?" "No." "Susan told me about you. You're buying her house." "Ah, you must be Ben. And she's buying your house." "She is." "If you mean what you say, that is." "Oh, yes. I'm going to buy hers, and if you want proof of my good intentions, she will be passing a decent amount of money on to you as a deposit from the money I've already put into her bank account. And," he said, gaining confidence and stepping out onto the veranda, "there is also the question of whether you mean what you say." The older man smiled for the first time since John's arrival. All right, listen. Susan thinks you're something pretty wonderful, so I can assume you can't be all that bad." He stood up and held out his hand. "I'm Ben Carter. Pleased to meet you, John, or should I say Herbert." John shook his hand and laughed. "She really has told you everything?" He made a sweeping gesture. "Is that what she's buying? All of this?" "Yes, all 4 acres of it. Didn't she tell you?" "No, I didn't ask, and we just didn't get round to discussing it. I don't think it's one of her secrets, unlike her second job." "Well, I'm not going to tell you what she does for a living, but don't worry about it. She's not doing anything sinister." "She'll tell me when she's ready, I expect, but I don't care. It's none of my business, I suppose, like your house." "She won't mind me telling you all about this place. She asked me this morning if she could show you round on Sunday afternoon." "I'll tell her you're here," he said, picking up a phone from a shelf behind him. "No, don't do that. She might think I've been nosing into her affairs." Ben raised his palm and shook his head as he dialed a number. "Hello, this is Ben. Guess who I met this morning? A friend of yours, out taking photographs of the River Gade. Yes, John." "Well, I ought to be able to spot a newspaper photographer by now." Anyway, I've invited him to have a look round my place. Hope you don't mind. You can still bring him over on Sunday and we'll have a chat then. Do you want to speak to him? OK, I'll tell him. Bye. He put the phone back on the shelf. She's with a client, but says she's very happy we've met and wants me to show you round. So, he said, getting up. Lead the way, said John. Have you known Susan long? About 6 months. I met her in the estate agents when I decided to sell this place. It never got as far as a company sales list because she wanted to buy it. Apparently she used to play here as a child long before this house was built, and often dreamt of living here. I had the place valued and her offer was about right. I won't have to pay estate agents' fees either, neither will she when you buy her place. She's not daft, is she? Oh no, I agree with you there. 20 minutes later they had completed the tour of the property and now stood in front of the dam where they had first met. Ben was just summing up his situation. So there you are. It'll all have to be flattened by bulldozers pretty soon. I might have been able to get a bit more money by selling it to developers, but it's not going to be worth millions. There is only planning permission for a single dwelling. Mind you, if that cow Malacott and her friends get hold of it, you never know what might happen. It might end up as a housing estate. I'd rather die than sell it to her. No, I want Susan to have it. I know she won't ruin it like they would. What's going to happen to the dam? Oh, you mean the garden water feature? He grinned and looked sideways at John. That's staying. It just happens to supply my modest requirements of electrical power as well as being decorative. Am I right in thinking that this is the reason for the drop in the water level in the river? Might be. It's very low in the park and the lake in the town centre is almost dried up. OK. See that sluice gate over there? That normally allows the full amount of water to flow past the dam when I'm working on it. I've been making the wall a bit higher so I can get more power. I finished the work 2 weeks ago and closed the sluice almost completely so the dam would fit up. I didn't think anyone would notice. As far as I know, only one person did. I just photographed her standing in the middle of the river. Well, as you may have observed when you arrived, it's now full and has just started spilling over the top of the wall. So from now on the river should be flowing normally through the town. Good. Are you going to tell the paper about this? You'd rather I didn't, obviously. John walked off a little way while he thought about it. Well, it won't be much of a story now the water level is going to rise again. Tell you what, you forget about finding this place and I'll let you on the site when they come to knock the house down. How about that? Are you going to be here to the last, then? Don't know what I'm going to be doing, to be honest. I suppose you want me to throw myself in front of one of the bulldozers? Of course. Did I tell you I used to be a snapper for the national papers in London? Fleet Street it was then. No. Another time, perhaps. It's all right, I won't tell the paper anything about the dam. Thank you. Will Susan be able to get electricity? No chance, not unless she pays about £30,000. There are no cables anywhere near here. I'm hoping the bastards won't take the dam to pieces. She's probably going to need it. Oh, I now understand why she said she would have to do a lot of work on the property, and also how she is able to afford somewhere to live on 2 acres of land. Listen, I'd better go. Thank you very much for showing me everything. Nice to meet you, and I want you to know how happy it's made me showing you around. I don't do this with many people. I feel privileged. Ben's face became very sad suddenly. I'm going to be heartbroken having to leave this. He watched as John began climbing back up the steps. See you on Sunday. I'll see you before then. On Saturday evening I'm supposed to photograph you with the mystery skeleton and Dr. Salter and the mayor. If you want a picture of me, you'll have to do it when she's gone to the toilet or something. Back at the Gazette office, Dick East asked him how he got on. Nothing really. The river seems to be flowing quite well north of the town, and I met an old man who seemed certain that it would be back to normal in a few days. Was it Ben Carter? Yes, it was. You don't seem surprised. Dick laughed. He's been in our paper many times, mainly about disputes with the council over his weird property, arguments with the mayor in particular. He tapped the open diary with his pen. Are you going to be all right with these jobs? I recommend that you download your stuff as often as possible. Now, as soon as you've got enough pictures on Sunday evening, come back here and leave the camera card on the editor's desk. He will be coming in about 9 o'clock to make up the early pages, and he will download your images then. He will be at the opening with the VIPs, so you won't need to leave the caption details. He knows everybody anyway. Thank you, I'll be fine. As for now, I'll give you the first images of Molly Waring on the bridge, then I'll grab a sandwich and be off on the other stuff. He found himself enjoying the newsroom banter as he worked on his images. A reporter hurried into the room and clicked the remote control for the big internet display screen at the end of the room. I've just heard on the car radio that the Home Secretary has been in a hunting accident in Scotland. He turned to face his colleagues. Yes, he was shot in the Cairngorms, apparently. Sounds very nasty, said the editor without looking up. Then someone with a strong Welsh accent spoke up. I went to Loch Lomond in January. Bloody cold it was too. I got frostbite in the Trossachs. There was a chorus of groans. 6 hours later, John found himself in the pedestrian area of the town centre attending his last job of the day. By then he had photographed a 100-year-old spinster, a retiring headmistress, a school netball match, father and son marathon runners, a little boy with learning difficulties who insisted on taking everything out of his camera bag, a cat who had been shot with an air gun, and now he was about to photograph an unveiling of a statue in the town centre by Mayor Daphne Malacott. As she introduced herself, he noticed that she smelt of cheap perfume and had lipstick on her teeth. She then told him to make sure he had got some film in his camera, which caused her companions to laugh politely. Encouraged by this, she said, "And I hope you have insurance. I wouldn't want my face to crack your lens." John's head filled with very impolite replies, but like many others around him, he fixed a meaningless smile on his face and said nothing. The statue was hidden under a grey cloth which was loosely held in place with a cord at the end of which dangled a tassel ready for the mayor to pull. About 20 people stood round in a circle. A few of these were trying to look at their watches without being noticed. "Madam Mayor, if you're ready," said the sculptor, a red-faced man in a brown suit who was very good at fawning. The mayor stepped forward and brought out a sheaf of papers. "Oh no," thought John, "we could be here for ages." He endured his suffering by his usual way of slipping into daydreams. He thought of Susan. I wonder what she's doing now. Not out with her hen night pals. No, that's tomorrow. One thing's for certain. I'm not going to spend much time worrying about her. She seems quite capable of looking after herself. He smiled as he thought of her tactics in the pub. I'd better be careful not to get on the wrong side of her, and if I do, I'm damn sure I'm going to avoid physical confrontation. I like the giant bed, though, and the things you can do on it. How did the rest of the room get wrecked? "And it gives me great pleasure," John shook off his daydream and stepped forward, camera at the ready, "to unveil this statue of Henry VIII, which I'm sure will be enjoyed by all the people of Hemel, Hempstead, and our visitors, of course, who I hope will stop by here and admire. The mayor tugged hard on the cord, but nothing happened. The sculptor ran round the statue, fiddled with something, and came back. "That should do it. Allow me to assist you, Madam Mayor." They stood in readiness as John got into position and took a couple of before shots. "After 3, then," said the mayor. 1, 2, 3. Pull!" Nothing happened. The tiny crowd surged forward, and many hands grabbed the cord and the edges of the cloth. "Heave!" said everyone, and they heaved. There was a sound of tearing cloth, followed by a grinding crunch as the whole party fell to the ground with the cloth on top of them. The last to be uncovered was the mayor, who sat pointing at the top of the statue with a trembling and dusty finger. "Look!" she shouted, with a quavering voice. "It's got no head. Someone's decastrated it." "There it is," said the sculptor, pointing to a place between the mayor's legs from where the stern, bearded face of Henry looked back at his body. Minutes later, John walked to the car, put his camera bag in the boot, and headed home to Watford. Half an hour later, he staggered up the stairs to his room and dumped his camera bag by his bed. He carried his supper, a takeaway vegetable curry, down to the kitchen and was relieved to see a note from his flatmate telling him that he had gone away for the weekend. John liked to eat alone and do the crossword at the same time when he was tired. Susan had left him a message on his phone. "Hello, Herbert Street. This is Susan Savage, your lover." I like saying that. It seems so honest and sounds just the tiniest bit sort of improper, unlike sweetheart or darling or dearest. Anyway, I miss you lots. I think of you all the time. At work today they kept asking me why I was smiling. Apparently I'm usually very stern unless I'm talking to a customer. I must be in love. I'm going to sleep now because I have a busy day tomorrow. It's 10:15. Good night. By the way, you haven't said you love me yet. It's all right. I know you do. I just want you to say it. I'm not going to say it now either, just so you know how it feels. Then another message. Oh, bugger it. I love you. John pressed the recall button to be told, "This number is not responding. The telephone you are trying to reach may be switched off. Please try later." "OK, I'll do just that," he mumbled as he felt his eyelids closing on him. But he didn't. He only just managed to shower and clean his teeth before falling asleep seconds after climbing into bed.